I'm Phyllis Grant. I'm married to Bill Grant. I grew up in Boulder. I met Bill when I was a teenager. We were married when he got out of the Navy. We have 3 children, Bill, Valerie, and Steve.
I'm Steve Grant, and was basically born and raised at First Christian and LifeBridge. That was about 9 years ago. Got my kids off to college and started a new life with Stephanie, and things are rolling along like all of us. And life's good, CEO of my company. Things are running well in the company. Stephanie's career is going well. My girls are doing awesome. Great family, close by. I've always been close to my brother, sister, mom, and dad, daughters.
At First Christian, Bill was quite honored when he became a deacon in the church, and he took that quite seriously. We washed an awful lot of communion cups as a family, which was a good lead-in for leadership there, if you can wash all those cups. He then became an elder and took that very, very seriously. He taught Sunday school. He worked on every building project there was. He worked on Camp Como. You name it, he did it, and he loved it. He enjoyed it. It's been a very, very important part of his life.
Dad is one of those enigmas that I think that generation is very complicated. Wasn't raised in faith, was raised in a pretty abusive environment. And I think he was pretty angry for a lot of years. And to see him mature in Jesus was something that, as a kid, we were like, what's going on with Dad? You know, Dad was an elder. Mom was secretary of the church for I don't know how many decades. Sorry, Mom, but a long time. And the church was just foundational to who we were as a family.
I love the people. I love greeting about as much as anything because there's nothing better than hugs from people on Sunday morning. God has been good. We've had many ups and downs. We've had some things go not so right. We've had some things go amazingly well, but God has been good so often in the past, and He's promised us our future's pretty rosy, so we can do nothing but trust Him, and we do. Bill's journey to where he is now started probably back in about 2005, maybe 2006, with just little things that he'd forget that we all say we do. And we do. We can't find this, we misplaced that. By 2012, he couldn't remember how to get places, and he finally gave up the car. That was the biggest thing.
This is a man that has impacted thousands of people personally in his life. And for that, I'm eternally grateful to him. And again, so glad to get to see him healthy someday. So when he got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was pretty brutal. As a kind of a gleam dimmed and he remembered less. And
when I went, they told me not to go for a while because, quite honestly, he was very, very angry that I would have done that to him. He could not imagine how we could have been married for so long, and I would take him out of his home and put him someplace. Those were the heartbreaking days. Those were the days that I shed the most tears.
It's not fun to be around somebody with Alzheimer's. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. Not for us. He's our dad. So I think when we go to see him, we just love on him. Try to give him some of the affection that he might be lacking. And when he does recognize us, it's a special gift. It's a special blessing to have a gift of memory for a moment come from him. But even that disease can't rob the impact he had on his family, his friends, and strangers who didn't know him, that he was generous with. And those he spent countless hours with at hospitals and nursing homes himself, because he loved Jesus and he wanted to tell them that he loved them. So yeah, he's a pretty amazing guy. I guess it was last fall of November 14, Started having a lot of back problems and unclear as to what was really going on. And went to the doctor because I've had friends at my age, when you get to be my age, that say, oh, it's stones, it's kidney stones. And because the pain was pretty incredible. So they ruled that out, did a CT scan before Thanksgiving and said, there's nothing going on that we can find. Let us know if it gets worse. So the next week I was back at the hospital in Estes Park, and at that point in time they found the tumor. And they said, it looks 99% like it's a cancerous tumor of your pancreas. The next day I had emergency surgery, just exploratory to kind of find out what was going on. And I guess it was about 2 or 3 days before Thanksgiving, and they staged it as a 2A or B, which is very survivable. So we were all praying and rejoicing and thanking God. And 3 days later, they said, look, we need to go in and do some biopsy though. We want to biopsy the tumor, and we're going to biopsy your liver. We don't see anything, but it's just protocol. So 3 days later we met. Still hard to talk about. We met with the oncology team, and they said it's metastatic to your liver. You got 1 to 3 months to live. And to see my daughters and my wife collapse in agony was too much. It was too much. And it just hit us like a bolt of lightning just strikes everybody. And we were down. We didn't know what to do, where to go. So we just huddled in a room and we just cried for a couple hours. Just cried out to Jesus. Just something's wrong. This can't be right. This can't be real. And it's real. And they said, 1 to 3, but 3 to 6 if you do some treatment. I'm not gonna leave my kids and my wife behind, so I said, yeah, I'll do anything.
My son Steve, who was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. That was a surprise diagnosis. That was a hit you in the stomach diagnosis. And the day we went down, when he found out in November, it's just been a year now, that was a heartbreaking day.
I remember thinking I'd never see a year. And every day is a gift. And trust me, it doesn't go unrecognized by us that I'm living on God's time.
I think Steve is probably the bravest person I know to go week after week for treatments. It hurts. It's like you can't help. Neither one of them can I help. I can't give Bill back his memory, and I can't stop Steve's pain. But I pray.
Not mad at God. I was never mad at God. I understand God is not behind this in any way. But I think God will be glorified through it. And ultimately, that's all that really matters in our life on this earth.
I guess I figured it wasn't really fair. And then you stop and think and you pray and you figure what is fair. Would it be fair for me to say that Joe Schmo should have gotten it instead of Steve because he's not my son and Steve is? I feel very deeply. God, when I was born, God's known. God knows. He knows that prick on the hand, the mark on the hand. He knows when my last day will be. He knows when Bill's last day will be, and he knows when Steve's last day will be. And I pray daily that Steve has many, many more days. To be real honest, sometimes I pray that Bill can soon go to be with the Lord that he loves so much. He has many, many friends there. He has family there. I don't think it's fair to be in this limbo state because, oh my goodness, he's going to love heaven. Who wouldn't? And who wouldn't want to be with the God that he's just worked for and loved and talked about and taught about for so many years? So, not fair. How can we say? I can't say fair or not. I'm not in charge. I just have to trust.
The tough part about being diagnosed the week of Thanksgiving was, in my family especially, the holidays are just so important.
What will this Christmas be like? I don't know. One day at a time. One day at a time. I'm praying that it's a very, very special Christmas.
I think I'm super excited to be a grandpa for the first time, and oh my gosh, I can't even express it. Those of you that are there know it. It's my first granddaughter, and the love that I see in her every time I hold her just makes the pain dissipate. So for me, this Christmas is, man, another baby that just brings peace and joy and comfort and hope, and that the legacy of faith will continue with her, and that I get to spend some time with her. And it just made me think about how, Jesus really came into such a chaotic world. Things weren't great, and how he still comes into our chaos as a Prince of Peace. And that's always my holiday prayer now, is just rebirth of peace, and to have that sense of kingdom here, and knowing that I'm going to a greater kingdom, and know that it's sad that I might not see more Christmases, but I will see my family in Christ again. And that, makes everything else seem irrelevant.
For God to send a son and this precious baby, knowing all the while each of them what would eventually one day come, that makes what I'm going through pretty paltry in comparison. Because what a gift, what a gift. This marvelous baby child, and looking at this beautiful granddaughter I have now, you think of this little tiny baby to bring the hope of the whole world and something like that. That's amazing. And can you think how many lives have been touched? Can you think how many hearts have opened? And can you think how many people have had their lives totally changed because of this one baby boy? This beautiful gift. What a gift.
It is well with my soul until it isn't. Until something happens that disrupts the heartache, the disappointment, the hurts that come our direction. As we head into a Christmas season, here's what happens to us often. Whatever's going on in our lives, we make an assumption that's what's happening in everybody else's life. So if it's smooth sailing and going great for us, we're assuming it is for everybody else. And what we know is that isn't true. It isn't always that way. There are some, as we head into this Christmas season, who are having a really tough time. Maybe this past year you've gone through a divorce and the heartache and pain that comes with. Or maybe you've lost a job, or you got really bad news health-wise. Maybe for you, you've experienced the grief of losing a loved one, and all that Christmas magnifies. The holidays take our pain and they magnify it. We catch ourselves hearing all about the joy, and we don't seem to be able to get any. We look at all the Christmas lights, and they don't seem to penetrate the darkness we're experiencing. We see what others have, and we know there's something missing from our lives, from our homes right now. And so for many, Christmas is a tough time. And so that's why we do this Blue Christmas service as this first weekend in December heads us toward the Christmas holidays and New Year's and all that goes with that. Because it can be so painful for so many. Heartache and loss and disappointment. Phyllis had her prayer answered Friday night. Bill went home to be with the Lord Friday evening. And she and Steve shot that video for us a couple of weeks ago. And I think Steve may be in this service. Why don't you be praying for him as he's continuing to battle the cancer. But we have a lot of others in the life of our church, some who are right now under hospice care, Roger Wagner and Barb Hudson and others that we want you to be praying for. And while we're just a small part of the community, really, we recognize how big deal stuff, if it's happening in our family, we recognize it's happening in families all over. This past yesterday, I did a funeral for a young man, Shane Matthias, 22, died suddenly of an aneurysm. And be praying for his mom and dad, Chad and Diane, and Bill and Tony and his sister Angie, as they're now in that fog of grief. And one of our longtime church members passed away Thursday, Marjorie Church. We're praying for Leona and her family. And one of our former staff members, Roberta Robbie Lazinski, in her mid-50s, lost her battle with cancer this past Thursday as well. There's just heartache, isn't there? And the holidays magnify. Whatever's going on, it throws out hooks and it grabs other stuff, and stuff seems bigger. Grief doesn't take a holiday. The Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 4 speaks these words: "We are hard-pressed on every side, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed." Hard-pressed, perplexed, persecuted, knocked down. There's a long list of stuff that does that to us. And some of you right now are in the middle of some of those things. And the Christmas season just kind of bubbles all that up in a bigger way. And so we want to simply come alongside that. If you're in the midst of that heartache right now, if you're headed into this Christmas season and with dread or loss or that fog, let me give you a couple of don'ts. One, don't pretend that everything is going to somehow just get fixed and be like it was, because whatever's happened has happened, and things will never actually be like they were. And don't expect others to actually get it for you. They want you to be past this somehow. They want you to be over this, and they're not exactly sure. Don't actually worry that some of our friends and family get awkward around this, because they're not really sure what to say to us. In fact, the truth is they're probably going to say some dumb things to us. Don't worry about how others are reacting. Don't pretend that you don't hurt. Don't do that thing we're so great at in America, which is, "How are you?" "Oh, I'm fine," when the truth is inside you're not fine. It's okay for the emotion. It's okay for the tears. Recognize that the holidays are going to be tough emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationally, so many different ways. Don't decide to try to somehow cancel the holiday like it's not actually happening, like somehow closing our eyes to the reality that we are in this season. Here's a couple of things you should do. Do allow yourself to grieve, that whatever has happened has happened, that loss of a loved one, the loss of a relationship, whatever it is that's creating the angst right now, grief is real. And grief comes in waves to us. Some days we wake up and think we're fine. The next day we can't hardly get out of bed. And it's okay. It takes time. It's a road we travel. Do start some new traditions. Maybe do something different than you've done before. Maybe a smaller gathering with some friends, or maybe just some quiet way in your own home you're reminded of Christmas. Maybe you do some old things in new ways. Do allow some others to journey with you on this. Don't try to do this by yourself. Some of us we kind of buck up, and while not everybody, not all our friends and family will connect on this, there are some who will, and let them in. Let them experience some of what you're experiencing. Share some of your heartache. Don't stop telling the stories about that person. And do recognize that stuff's going to happen in weird ways that you didn't anticipate. Even now, for me, all these years later, after my sister's death, and because it happened at Christmas, we sang Silent Night at her funeral service, and we never ever sing that. I never hear that song on the radio without flashing back to a memorial service in a little church in New York. Don't be surprised when that stuff happens to you. And do let God heal the hurt, because He will. Invite Him in, even some days when you think He's a long ways off. And give yourself some space. I love what the Apostle Paul does in this passage about trouble, because he turns the trouble for us. Notice he doesn't say, hey, you're never going to have any heartache or grief, that somehow you're going to live in this bubble wrap and you're going to be protected from disappointment, that cancer won't come to your home, that you won't lose a loved one, a child, a spouse, a friend, that your marriage will always be good. In fact, trouble does come. Here's what he says: we are hard pressed on every side. But, he turns it for us, he wants to hold it up differently. But we're not crushed. We're perplexed. We have questions. We have doubts. We have things we want answers to. But we're not in despair. We are persecuted. We feel that way at times, don't we? Where somehow trouble's just pounding on us. But we're not abandoned, he says. And we get knocked down, but we are not crushed or destroyed. And what he's simply doing is saying there is more to the story, that what you are going through right now isn't the end of the story. And you aren't alone in your trouble, although sometimes we feel incredibly alone. And you're not the only one who's experienced heartache, although at times we think we're the only one that's in that spot. We are not left without hope. And I love how he ends this passage, this section of Scripture. He says, Therefore we don't lose heart. Though outwardly we're wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles. I'll be honest with you, for a long time I struggled with that phrase right there, because my stuff didn't seem light or momentary. It felt like it was going on forever, and it was heavy. And all he's saying is this: our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. He's saying when it's balanced against eternity, what you're experiencing now isn't all there is. And so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. He's inviting us actually to be reminded of the Christmas story. That God sends hope, promise, a gift to us in Christmas. That there is more to our stories, that God wants to get engaged in the midst of our heartache. In the world, Jesus said, we're going to have some trouble, but take heart, take heart. I've overcome that trouble. And so Christmas is a reminder for us that God isn't going to leave us alone. And if right now this Christmas is a tough Christmas for you, that's okay. Give yourself space that's what it is. And if you have a friend who's lost a loved one, if you have a friend going through a difficult time, there is no better time for you to connect with them than now in this season. And don't worry about going with all the right words, because the truth is you're going to have all the wrong words. So don't worry about that. Just go. When my sister was killed in that car accident, I don't remember stuff people said to me. I do remember their presence. I do remember their coming alongside. Christmas story is actually the Easter story, isn't it? Because without the Easter story, there is no Christmas story. Jesus' death, God's grief and heartache, eclipsed by the resurrection, promise of Christmas.